So today during our APS talks, it's all about protecting nature, and to discuss this further, thank you so much for joining Nicolas Gallia from BirdLife Malta.
Hi, thanks for the invite.
Thank you. How come BirdLife Malta? You're a volunteer, you're employed there?
Yes, so basically I was born into this, so I really had no choice.
You were born into
I
this
was born
because?
into BirdLife, yes, because my dad has been a volunteer for a very long time.
Okay.
But he was interested in nature and birds. He started actually by trying to trap robins. So he started from the other side of the spectrum, and then he met a couple of friends who their father was a bird ringer, and they told him, why don't you join us? And from then on, it's sort of a switch in him, and he converted, let's say that, into this passionate birder and eventually conservationist. And so I was born. So on day one, I'm 31 years old now, and I've been a member for as long as I've lived because he subscribed me to BirdLife when I was born, basically.
So I had to take you back in time. I can see you as a toddler with your father. I don't know, joining some...
Yes. My father was sort of my hero when I was young. So he was traveling and visiting these countries and coming back. At the time it wasn't digital photography, so we had to wait for him to come back with these slides and sitting down on projector, seeing all these fantastic birds from different places. So when I grew up, I wanted to be sort of like him. At some point in my life, I decided to study IT actually.
Okay.
So in secondary, I was introduced to IT. I saw it as a fun way of using your creativity, and so I diverted from biology because I was studying biology.
Okay.
And then I studied IT, so I graduated actually in IT.
And you wanted to specialize in back then?
I mean, at first I wanted to become an ornithologist, a biologist and ornithologist. I mean, in Malta we have this limitation that at university we don't have an ornithology course. We have biology and we have earth systems courses, but we don't have a proper ornithology courses. And my father's dream for me, sort of, was that I would study biology and become the ornithologist.
Your father is your hero indeed, I can tell.
Yeah, but then I sort of diverted into IT. I decided to study IT.
What happened then?
Mostly because I realized that biology, I mean, it was difficult to work with biology. I mean, I was not interested in things like pharmaceutical and things like that. So to spend my life in a lab, it wasn't something I aspired to. So I decided to divert in IT. But what I realize now is that there are many biologists who know biology and know the birds, but there are few IT people who know IT and also know the birds and know the ecology.
So never say never.
Yes, exactly. So now I'm employed with BirdLife, as you said. I've been 3 years employed. I've been a volunteer in various levels all my life, sort of. So I know the insides and outs of BirdLife. And my IT skills nowadays come in handy because of course IT is used everywhere.
Your role within BirdLife, if you can perhaps tell me more?
Yes, my official role is a coordinator on a project. So basically, at EU level, each member state is obliged to report on the state of biodiversity of the country, including the birds. There is the Habitats Directive, the Birds and Habitats Directive, and there's this called Article 12, where basically each member state is obliged to report on the state by doing field work and by then publishing a report which says these birds are doing well, these birds are not doing well, these are the threats, these are the pressures, these are the conservation, etc. And the government issues a tender, and BirdLife Malta, together with some other partners, was awarded the contract. And basically that's where I came in. There was an opportunity to employ someone that needed to know the birds. I also take care of the data, basically, and that's where I come in. That is my official role. Then I do lots of other things. I also take care of the bird ringing scheme.
As well, and we shall discuss about that further soon. What about the team of people employed at BirdLife Malta? It's a huge number.
No, of course it's quite limited. I think offhand we're around 20 people. So it is. Okay. People think we are a much smaller organization, but we are bigger. We do a lot of things. So we have teachers employed with us, seconded rather than employed with
Seconded,
us.
okay, fair enough.
We have, of course, a finance team because we have some large EU projects, so we need to manage the finance there. We have the reserves, so we have our wardens there, and then we have people managing the reserves. And then we have outreach team, we have people working in conservation, so quite a diverse team, both Maltese and foreigners as well. Plus the volunteers, which are very important for us as well.
If I had to ask you about BirdLife mission and vision, because for me, BirdLife screams literally protecting nature and birds and bird watching. But what's the organization's mission statement?
Yes, our mission statement is to be there for the birds, first of all, for nature, and also for people. So our vision is that people should live in harmony with nature, respecting the habitat, respecting nature, and of course, birds are our main focus. And birds are very good indicators of the rest of the ecosystem, the rest of the environment. So by protecting a particular species of bird, we cannot simply care about this bird without protecting its habitat, where it lives, without protecting the food that it eats. So we are interested in the entire ecosystem. And of course, as with other NGOs, we often question, is BirdLife needed, sort of? Are we doing a good job? Are we sort of, do we have a role in this society? And my answer is yes. And the vision is that eventually, if we succeed into sort of convincing everyone that nature should reign, sort of, etc., then we don't need to exist. But so far,
yes.
we still have a lot of work to do.
In fact, I was going to ask you, do people need convincing when it comes to protecting birds?
Yes.
And enjoying birds?
Yes, I mean, I was lucky. I feel lucky that I was born into it, so I don't need this I didn't need this introduction, sort of. I don't know another way to live. My calendar is not sort of January, February, March, but
it's a way of life.
Yes, exactly. But I meet a lot of new people, and when I introduce them to this way of life, sort of, they realize there's much more to life. Let's say that. And yes, people, unfortunately, especially nowadays, they're being less in contact with nature. So in the past, and we see a difference when speaking even to young children, Maltese versus Godzitans, for example. I do a lot of ringing demonstrations, so a lot of even for school children. And I see the difference between the Maltese and the Godzitans. The Maltese are much more homebound and sort of superficial. They do not know what migration is. You have to explain even sometimes the seasons. Whilst the Godzitans, they live more outdoors, they know a bit more. So although there's of course much more hunters and trappers in Gozo, but I feel it is easier to sort
They're
of...
more at one with nature.
Exactly.
Okay. If I had to ask you, because you were mentioning ringing a lot.
Yes.
You mentioned it even when you explained your role. Can you, perhaps because I
yes,
wouldn't
so
know.
Bird ringing is in a very basic description, the term ringing is when you put a ring on a bird.
Fair enough.
So basically it's a scientific study where we catch wild birds.
Okay.
Usually we use mist nets, although we can use different methods depending on the species of the bird we need to study. We catch them temporarily and we put a ring on them, and this ring has a unique ID on it, a unique number, and also our address. In our case, it has BirdLife Malta, Valletta. And the idea is that you are uniquely identifying a bird. So when this bird shows up somewhere else, you know which one it is. So when you are bird watching with binoculars, you're walking, you see birds flying around, you can identify the species. This is a collared flycatcher, it's a male or a female. But that's it. When you have the bird in your hand, first of all, you can look into more detail. You can see if it's a young bird, an adult bird, depending on the condition of the feathers. You can take some measurements, like weighing it, for example. These things, of course, visually you cannot see. And also, the most powerful thing is that it is marked individually. So if it turns up somewhere else, either another ringer catches it, or it is found dead somewhere, or nowadays we also use rings. They are called color rings, which are on larger birds, which you can see without catching the bird again. And that gives you sort of a map of where this bird is heading. One bird alone does not give you a map. But if you catch thousands, if you ring thousands of birds and then you have a number of recoveries of them, because of course the proportion of birds that are caught is much lower than the new birds you ring.
Okay.
Because there are millions of birds, they are migrating, they are spreading across Europe, so every year we ring thousands, and then a few of them are recaptured. But over the years, this year we are celebrating actually 60 years of bird ringing in Malta. We have a nice map of where these birds are coming from or are heading to. Plus also the fact there's many other things you can study with ringing, you can quantify. So for example, we always use the same methodology, we have the net set up in the same place, etc., etc. So today is a windy day, for example, it's not so good, and tomorrow is a better day, so we can compare with variables in the weather, etc.
Okay.
We can look back in number of years and see the effect of climate change, which is affecting birds, for example. Some birds are doing better, and some birds are doing worse, especially the birds that migrate very long distances. They are not doing so well. We think, I mean, it's not my studies, but international studies, it's because there is a loss in synchronization of migratory birds with the habitats when they arrive back. So birds will, as I said, they are part of an ecosystem. They need certain types of habitats, they need certain type of food to eat. If they arrive and the insect they rely on, the butterfly, for example, they rely on to feed has already pupated a month ago and it's supposed to pupate now, for example, or not, and they find less food to feed their chicks, they will have less eggs, for example, and eventually that will have a toll on the population and we will see a decrease. So all this, thanks to studies, thanks to ringing, thanks to bird monitoring, and that is what we do.
The data capture, because this is fascinating. What you've been mentioning, the data during the ringing process. It's reflected somewhere.
Yes, so basically we still do it manually. We still write on. I mean, when in the field, we write on paper, and then every ringer, when he or she goes home, we input it in a database. I said I come from the IT part, so the database I developed myself.
So you're responsible for the ringing, for the database.
Yes, yes. And I mean, in BirdLife, you asked me how many people we are. We are a few people.
Doing a lot of jobs.
Doing a lot of jobs because we do not afford, I mean, to have one person specialized in IT, one person specialized in that, and you know. So yes, we have sort of a jack of all trades, master of a few, sort of.
No, I'm sure it's master of a lot as well. But then this data is stored?
Yes, the data is stored locally, and then every year we submit the data to a European database called the U-Ring Databank. So basically our ringing scheme forms part of a bigger coordinated scheme called U-Ring, which is sort of the European Union of Bird Ringing. It's an association of ringing schemes across the continent, which is very important because of course our birds are not our birds, they are moving through, so connectivity is also data-wise. And the idea behind this database is that if some sort of scientists or anyone that is studying a particular species, rather than going to every scheme and collecting data individually, there is one central place where the data can be exported and then used in studies, etc.
So you do study the trends and compare, and we're heading towards which era now?
In nature, there's a lot of fluctuation, so it is normal that populations fluctuate. At the moment, we have climate change, which is a big challenge. Plus, also after the war and the industrial revolution, etc., humans have changed the face of the earth, basically. So the way agriculture was previously is nothing compared to now. We have this monoculture system with big machinery, lots of pesticides, etc., which is affecting bird populations. Of course, the effects are not immediate, so it takes some time for birds to start decreasing or increasing to notice them. At the moment, it's worrying for a number of species, especially, as I said before, the long distance, what we call long distance migrants. So our birds, at the moment we're in spring, our birds have spent the winter in Africa, so sub-Saharan Africa, most of them, so below the Sahara, and now they cross the Sahara and they're in Malta, crossing the Mediterranean, going into Europe to breed. It is genetic in them, they do it as part of their evolution. And as we know, evolution takes millions of years, so small changes over millions of years become traits and eventually define species. And in the last 50 years, the world has changed because of humans in a way that evolution cannot keep up. So even during, for example, migration, these birds have, most of them migrate at night because it is safer to migrate at night. At night it's supposed to be dark. There's supposed to be the moon, the brightest thing, but of course, thanks to humans, light pollution is now a big problem, causing birds even to get lost. Part of our job is also we have a rehabilitation center, so we collect a lot of injured birds throughout the year. And we noticed during some months that a lot of birds get stranded because of the light, for example. And we find them in rooftops, and also they collide with tall buildings with glass. Yes. This again is not something that animals and nature have evolved to experience glass, so they simply fly through. They see a reflection of things and they think they can fly through. So yes, what we try to do is collect this data to show that there's this need of protecting and trying to influence, of course, policies. We cannot make policies ourselves. We wish we could just say, okay, no more light or no more things, you know, but we try to make people aware that there's this problem, and politicians aware, both in Malta level and also at EU level. In fact, recently there was this recent legislation passed at EU level called Nature Restoration Law, which is obliging now countries to restore the nature. So these changes that we've mentioned post-war, sort of, to try and restore what has been damaged. So not just protecting what is already protected, but to restore areas we've sort of destroyed.
Earlier on, rightly so, you said that enjoying birds means protecting and caring for the habitat for play. Are we doing that?
Very little. I mean, to be frank, unfortunately. We as BirdLife, we have a number of nature reserves. So thankfully, in the past, a number of people had the vision of, for example, Adira Nature Reserve used to be, it was the first salt pens built by the Knights. But then eventually it became a dumping site, it became a car park, it became a hunting ground. And thankfully, BirdLife Malta had the vision of converting it to a nature reserve where birds can thrive, but also the rest of nature, and also people can come and enjoy the place. We also have another nature reserve, Semar Nature Reserve, which came after, which is Shamshia. Again, it was a dumping site. And BirdLife had this vision of transforming it into a nature reserve. Foresta 2000 is another example. In Melliha, there's this place which used to be a simple clay slope, and also used to be a hunting ground. And we had this vision of, it was in there in 2000, so that was the idea of naming it Foresta 2000. This idea of converting this sort of forest. And we dreamed that eventually Adira Nature Reserve and Foresta 2000 and these places are one big sort of nature park. We lack this idea of wilderness in Malta. It's very difficult to go somewhere and forget that there's civilization and walk into nature.
So far we mentioned the centers, the ringing. Yes. I also know that you believe in education as well. Educating the young, start them young.
Yes, so basically we do a lot of education. We have a team dedicated for education and we have a number of teachers. These teachers, they work in the reserve. So basically every day we are actually fully booked. Every day, every school day, we have school children visiting the nature reserves. So at least we take them out of the sort of their schools, which unfortunately most schools are built with just concrete. There's very little soil, very little nature. So we take them out and bring them for a day into nature, where they are taught about Maltese nature, basically, and they can actually experience it. It's very difficult to teach someone something without him or her experiencing it. So it's very, I mean, it's one thing showing a photo of a bird on how and germination and seeds, blah blah blah, on a PowerPoint or on a textbook. But then going out in nature and seeing them. And it's important so that the kids understand that there is nature in Malta and it needs protection, and they also learn how to find it. a lot of people, when we do our sort of education work and outreach work, the first thing they say, I didn't know that these nice birds even existed in Malta, let alone that I could be able to see them.
And at times it's quite concerning because earlier on you mentioned that there are instances where students or children don't know about the seasons.
Yes,
I find
they know that the
quite
season
worrying.
starts on the 21st of March, that's spring, but what actually happens in spring, what it means
Of
in
course.
Malta, what is blooming, what is not. What's, for example, climate change, we have less rainfall. How is it affecting our season? These things, unless you experience them, it's difficult to care about something that you don't
Of course.
experience. So if we want our children to care about protecting nature, we have to get them to experience it.
So what do you do at BirdLife in terms of education?
Yes, so we have these things at school. So we have schools, children visiting. That's one very important part. We also have this program called Dinja Wahda. So basically, we have this Dinja Wahda program, which is a set of sort of lessons that teachers can do with their kids. Some of them are also part of the syllabus now. We are working into that because we know that teachers have a lot of things to do, have a lot of. And sometimes they see our stuff as a bit extra, sort of. So we also work with the education departments to integrate these. We believe that these should be part of everyone's sort of upbringing,
Not an extra.
not an extra. You should know, these things. So we work a lot with teachers so that they because of course teachers have access to school children every day. If they just come to our reserve once, it's different than having a teacher that is nature sort of aware and teaches. So we work a lot with educators to educate the children. We have these lessons that they can do. It's sort of, we gamify it a bit because there's a system of points and awards. They submit it. There's also a website which I did, so my IT comes in again. Where they can submit what they've been doing in class, and then we have this ceremony where we give them awards. We do education at various stages of life, of course, so we don't stop only at children. We are trying also to do more at secondary schools, because we know that is when people get their focuses, their passion, they make friends, etc. So we want to work there as well. And we organize a lot of talks and events where we try and teach also the general public in general about birds and nature. And at the moment we also have a new project related to education, which is trying to bring nature into schools. So we have this called Ġonna Dinja Wahda, this program called Ġonna Dinja Wahda. We are working with some schools that at least have some soil, sort of. Not everywhere is covered in concrete. To try and turn their nature patch into a proper wildlife garden. We have this idea in Malta of a garden, which is a concrete path with benches and sometimes even planting not even native trees. And then we're surprised that there's no insects and there's no local wildlife in these gardens. So we try and teach these children and to take care of a nature patch in school, wildlife. So for example, pollinators. Finally, now we are seeing that the authorities are aware.
I think we are improving. Yes.
We are. So yes. I mean, and at this
level, at least at this stage.
Yes.
Earlier on, you also mentioned that you have some EU-funded projects. Are these the same projects that you just mentioned?
We have various. So a lot of people, not a lot of people, but sort of our opposition tell us, you do this for the money, you try and, of course, without money you can't.
You need the funds, of course.
So yes, we try and tap into a lot of EU funding because EU gives opportunities to work at a local level and improve things. So we have various projects. One of them is related to seabirds, for example.
And the aim there is to?
So in Malta we are lucky to have, of course we are an island, we're in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, and the sea is a big habitat, is a big ecosystem where a lot of nature thrives. We have 3 species of seabirds that breed in Malta, and we have a very good population of them. One of them, called the Alcoan shearwater, we actually have the 10% population of the world. I mean, for the species is the Mediterranean, because it lives in the Mediterranean, and in winter it actually migrates to the Black Sea. And 10% of this population, which is a few thousand pairs, they breed in Malta and Maltese cliffs. We get EU funds because the EU recognizes that it is important to protect this species. And we do a lot of work related to light pollution, for example, because these birds, through evolution, they know to visit only their colonies, so the places where they breed at night, because there's less predators, and it is safer for them. And light pollution is affecting them because they are not even visiting their colonies in certain areas where there are bright lights. For example, on the west coast there are a lot of cliffs. We have a lot of cliffs. For example, in Hull Far, we used to have a good population of another species called Scopolis shearwater. There are some very nice cliffs there. But of course, now we have the industrial estate, the industrial factories, etc., built right next to the cliff edge. The buildings do not really affect this Scopolis shearwaters because they are nesting in the cliffs, but the lights that are left on at night, for example, for security, they affect the shearwater. So we work also with industries to use light, for example, only down-facing, rather than even street lights, etc., that face up and cause unnecessary light pollution. Another problem that these birds face is the rats. So rats are not native species. So again, I come back a lot to evolution, but biology works with evolution. So these birds have not evolved defense mechanisms against rats because they did not evolve together. So for example, a bird that has evolved in Africa with lots of predators, they have defense mechanisms against these species. But birds that have evolved without rats, they do not know what evolution didn't know about rats, basically, so they have no protection. Their egg is simply laid in a barrow unprotected. So the rat population in Malta is unfortunately quite large, especially in areas where, for example, like Blue Lagoon, a lot of people go there, they enjoy it, and there's nothing wrong with that.
But they leave food.
They leave the pineapples, for
stuff.
example, which is organic matter. Which leads to the rats population exploding during some times of the year. And then when these rats do not find enough food left by humans, then they roam around, go down cliffs and find eggs. There are places where we do a lot of rat eradication, so basically we cull using traps, etc. We remove the rats. And we've seen a lot of improvement. And again, this is also where ringing comes in, because we ring these birds, and we know that they come back and they breed. They are the same birds, and we ring the chicks as well. So we know that in some areas where we're doing this work, the population is increasing.
What about the necessary strategies, even at EU level? Because I'm sure that you care about that as well.
As you said, there's EU level and local level. So the EU sets out policies usually. Some are obligations.
And obligations.
Some are obligations and some are sort of
standards to try to adhere to.
And then it is up to the Maltese government to reach those standards and those targets. And we help the Maltese authorities, like for example ERA. We work a lot with ERA.
Okay, through public consultations perhaps, or?
Various. So sometimes they have projects, their own projects,
okay,
and we are partners in them. Sometimes we do
consult and give advice, perhaps.
Advice. Yes, and we have the data as well, because of course the data is useful to first identify what you want to do and then also to measure what you're doing. So if, for example, we decide that light pollution is a problem and it is a problem, we need the data to show
But are we there yet when it comes to strategies and adopting strategies and policies?
You mentioned two things, strategies and adopting them. So the strategies, most of them are there. Without sounding too critical, we are very good at launching strategies and inviting people to demonstrate that we are launching the strategy 2030, 2050, blah, blah, blah. But then the actual implementation, I have to say, is not always what we really want. Also, it comes with the limitation of being a very small island. Things like land ownership, so everyone owns a piece of land in important habitats, and So there's the fact that we are a very small island makes it very, very complex.
But what, in your opinion, is very crucial at the moment?
At the moment, I think it's very crucial for us to realize that we are living in this world sort of with these creatures, with, of course, I mentioned the birds, but with nature. And that it's a race against time to at least stop the destruction in Malta, for example. I think we've already crossed the line, which is sort of difficult to go back. But at least we need to realize that there are still some areas and some nature that we protect, that needs protecting. In terms of birds, for example, we are lucky that we are in the middle of a migration route. So birds are passing through. We are in the middle of the Mediterranean. Most of them don't want or don't need to stop in Malta, because most birds want to cross the Mediterranean at one go. But some of them, maybe they've passed, they need to stop. And we need to provide the best habitat for them and the best environment for them to stop. Of course, we know that there's a bunch of people that are waiting for these birds for different reasons than I would be waiting for them to enjoy them. And that's one side of the problem. But of course, these birds need places to rest. So over construction is a problem, and a lot of problems.
But let's try to stay positive as much as possible. Any success stories? Because I'm sure that with your work...
Yes, over the years. So BirdLife Malta has been around for 65 years now. We were founded in 1962. We started, of course, as a very small organization. We were seen as these guys, not myself, but these guys caring about birds, and there was never this conflict. Then when we started working a bit more, and the first thing that we realized was that we need legislation in Malta. In terms of birds, for example, there was no proper legislation. Everyone could go on with a gun and kill whatever they wanted. So our first big success was to convince the authorities that some birds should be protected. Some birds should be protected when they're breeding, for example. That was our first big step. And then along the years, we've had a lot of things. So the reserves are a big success. Without the reserves, we cannot protect nature, and we cannot reach lots of people. These projects that I mentioned with seabirds, etc., are big successes for us. The education is a big success for us. I mean, living in it and always battling, you find it hard to sort of pat yourself on the back and say, you're doing a good job, because you always see how you want to improve. But yes, we've done a lot, and we are the biggest NGO in Malta, so that there is a reason for that as well, the biggest e-NGO. So there is a reason why we've existed for so long, and hopefully will exist for a very long time.
Now, prior to coming up with the actual subjects, even during our APS talks, we'll have to brainstorm and ask around. And one of the questions is usually, how can I make this better? Even when it comes, for instance, to my roof, how can I make it easier for birds?
Yeah, so there's a set of species which are quite urban. There are quite urban species. So the sparrow is the most obvious one, but for example, the blue rock thrush, el-meril, our national bird, is also quite an urban bird. I live in Birkirkara, a very busy street, and I have a blue rock thrush there singing all day, for example.
Most does the same at my parents.
Yes, blue rock thrushes have become urban birds, and there are other species. To help them, a lot of people have roofs and balconies, etc. One important thing is to plant some native trees in large pots. Things that are resistant to wind and to sun, so things like olive trees, maybe if there's space, and also shrubs, there's a shrub called Tullira, for example. And then there are various things, and the important is to have a sort of small ecosystem, so you attract insects, and the insects will attract the birds. Another important thing for birds is water. So especially in summer, if you leave some container with some water, they will love it. And birds will find it. It's amazing if you start looking in your garden, on your balcony or roof, what species you can see.
If I had to ask you about a dream come true when it comes to birds and birds watching, you mentioned this already, but what would you like, even when it comes to BirdLife Malta, your objectives, your goals?
My vision is that what is written in policies, etc., is actually seen in real life. So we have, for example, Natura 2000 sites designated. We have a big network in Malta. What is happening within them is sometimes disappointing. You go there and you see a lot of not illegalities, but a lot of things that are not in cohesion with nature.
Is it because we're careless or because we downplay?
Yes, I think a lot of people think only about not themselves,
Short term.
Very short term. So, and a lot of people think that the harm, the small harm they're doing, is not affecting the global thing. Even when it comes to hunting, for example, I mean, Maltese hunters blame other European countries or North African countries for the loss of the species. It is true that there is loss of there's harm being done everywhere, but humans need to understand that the little things they do affect. And my vision would be that I now have a very little daughter. She's just 2 months old. That I mean, in 10, 15 years time, she can go and walk in some valleys, which today I walk in them and I see lots of destruction, and she goes in and sees lots of.
And who knows, she might join BirdLife Malta and continue with this tradition.
She is a member already because I registered. Yes. Before I went to Identity Malta and registered her actually. So yeah, that part, yes, she's already receiving her magazines actually.
If one wants to become a member or register or get to know more about you.
Yes, it's very easy to register. We have our website, birdlifemalta.org, where people can browse in, and it's very easy to become members there. Both kids and adults. I forgot to mention that a big part of our education work is that we have a club called Club Huttaf, and we have a very nice magazine that is sent quarterly. It's in Maltese, so it's also a good way of keeping our Maltese language alive. And about nature, there's very few regular content that you can see in Maltese about Maltese nature. So that is one big plus if you join. And by joining, you'll be supporting us in all the work that I've mentioned and much more. You can also join our events and activities that we do regularly. Again, through our social media website, you'll find lots of things. And if someone wants to become a more sort of involved volunteer, etc., you can always email us on info@birdlifemalta.org and say, I want to do this or I want to help out with this, and we welcome everyone's help.
Your final message to those following this talk about protecting nature?
Yes, so my message is...
you don't even need to think about this one, you know, for sure.
Yes, I mean, first of all, think about nature, think about birds. Of course, birds for some are not the priority, but for me they are. So think about what you do that can affect positively impact birds and nature. Join BirdLife so that you help us, and another very important thing, I mean, in Malta we have quick access to politicians. Politicians actually knock your door. Some people are very vociferous when politicians knock their door and tell them, we want this, we want this, we want this. Tell the politicians that come to your door that you want to see birds alive, that you want to see more nature, so that they see that there's a lot of people and that this is a priority for them. That is my main message. Make nature your priority. And
let's also invest in our young ones.
Yes.
Let's start them young, even when it comes to nature.
Very important. To become nature literate, sort of. It's very, very important. As I said before, you cannot care for and protect something that you don't know about.
Nick, thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me here.